Hey, so this is a quick explanation of work in progress limits, which you'll sometimes find used in Kanban boards where people aren't working in sprints, they're working continuously. So these are our three people that are in the team. We've got John and Amy, who are the developers, and then on the right there, we've got Jess, who's the team's tester. So this is the team, three people, right? And their task board looks like this. So they've got a to-do column with the backlog in it. They've got a development column, which is tasks that are currently in development. There's a testing column for tasks that are currently being tested. And then there's a done column for things which are done and finished. And if we have a look at this with some stuff on the backlog, we've got 5 things on the backlog here, right? What we're now going to do is assign some arbitrary work in progress limits or WIP limits to the 2 in progress columns. So we're going to say that in development, there's a limit of 2. In other words, there can only be 2 things in development at once. And then we're going to say there can only be 1 thing in testing. Initially, we've chosen these numbers because we have 2 developers and 1 tester, but teams will generally work out the best limits for optimal throughput in this system. And I'll talk about throughput a little bit later on. So now we're ready to start work, right? And Amy and John, the developers, can both pull a story into development. So they've pulled the stories over, or the tasks over, and they're now working on them. If Amy finishes kind of quickly, right, because this is a small job to do, this can now be pulled over into testing. Okay, so Jess can now pull this over into testing and start working on it. This means that Amy now has capacity to pick up another story from the backlog and start working on that. So she'll take the top item from the backlog and be working on that. Now, at this point, we've reached our work in progress limits. Okay, we've got 2 things in the development column and we've got 1 thing in the testing column. So the system is at capacity according to the limits we've defined. Now, if John finishes his story, right, he kind of probably wants that to move over into testing, right, because he's done with it. But we can't do that because the limits we've got mean that we're at our limit in testing. Okay, so John can't move his story into testing. Now, what he could do is he could pick up another story from to do, and he could start working on that and just leave this in development. But the problem with that is that we'll then end up with a backlog, like loads of things that are done in development waiting to be tested. So the system has kind of got stuck, right? So rather than picking up something new from to do, because of these WIP limits, like we've got a limit of 2 here, right? So he can't pull anything into development because of that limit. So he's now got nothing to do, right? And he's sat there being like, well, I'm finished. I can't bring anything new in. What do I do? And the answer is that he should help Amy out with the testing, right? So he's going to mark his story as blocked here and head over and help out to try and get this thing tested. So in other words, he's trying to unblock the system. And this is the advantage of having these work in progress limits. It prevents the build-up of loads of stuff in one part of this production line. And it means that the resources, like John, get allocated to bottlenecks in this production line. So in this case, we've now got those 2 people working on trying to get that story tested so that we can move it to done and free things up. Now, if Amy finishes her story, right, she's got the same problem John did. She can't put anything new into development because we've reached our limit. So she's going to do the same thing. She's gonna put a block sticker on this and say, well, this is blocked because we can't move it down the production line. And she's going to head over and help out with the testing effort. And at this point, the entire team is focused on unblocking this production line by getting that 1 story that's really hard to test done and finished. If that gets finished, we can then pull over another story into development because these stories can all move down 1. So there's now 2 people focused on testing this to kind of unblock things. But John can pick up a new story and start working on that. And eventually, when the system unblocks itself, Amy can pick up a new story as well. And we can continue to test these other stories. Are obviously easier to test, so things can start moving through the production line again. And the big advantage to all of this is that by using work in progress limits, we focus resources on unblocking things which are blocking the throughput of this system, and it does that by default. Okay, so by using a system like work in progress limits with Kanban, the whole team is focused on the throughput of the system rather than just on getting their individual things done. Okay, and in this case, that avoids loads of stuff building up in development, and then we have this kind of blockage in testing, where we're going to end up with loads of stuff to test, right? So yeah, it's all about focusing resources on the bottlenecks in this system and improving whole system throughput. So if you see work in progress limits, that's the problem they're designed to solve, and how they work.